presentation. At this time, I would like to turn today's program over to Mary Jo Boss, President, PWN Global. Mary Jo, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Nakoa, for organizing and being our host. And it's a pleasure to be here this morning with two incredible guests who are experts on the topics of purpose and happiness, if you can be an expert. They are certainly happy. We have Srikumar Rao, who we're going to spend the first 45 minutes with, and we have Alice Korngold, and we're going to spend the second part of our webinar having a dialogue with her. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We want to send a special thank you to our corporate members. We have Orange and Baxter and RBS and Schneider with us. In addition to our co-sponsors on this event, MMC has been a terrific partner and sponsor in putting this event together, so we thank Marsh McLennan and Jennifer specifically and Swati for pulling this together. And they are our newest platinum partner at Professional Women's Network. And so we appreciate Rob Baker, who is with a sister company, Mercer, and he sits on our board. As everyone knows out there, we're run by volunteers, so we have a board of 10 people. Rob Baker leads our Engaging Men and is a partner at Mercer and helped us coordinate this as well. So now that our gratitude has been expressed openly to everyone who helped put this together, let's get started. And I want to introduce Srikumar. And good morning. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Mary Jo.
Great. So just a real quick summary on Srikumar, and then I want him to tell us a little bit about, what inspired his passion on this topic. Srikumar is someone I've known for a year or so and has certainly been an inspiration to me and has triggered some new thinking on the topic of happiness and shifting my mental model. Srikumar has authored several books, Are You Ready to Succeed? Happiness at Work, and I think one of your great successes recently has been your TED Talk, which has been...
It's been viewed a few million times.
Yeah, just a few times. So that is certainly inspiring. I encourage everyone to go to Srikumar's TED Talk if you can take, I think it's 20 minutes.
About 18 minutes.
18 minutes, so it's definitely worth your 18 minutes. So Srikumar has helped thousands of executives and MBA students find deeper meaning in their lives. He's a professor, a PhD from Columbia.
Correct.
And studied in India. You're from India.
Early part of my education was in India, yes.
Great. So tell us, Srikumar, I love your quote on your website, and your quote is, how do we get everyone on board with this, happiness, since we're always bound to have outliers? And you have this wonderful quote that said, you have a vision of a community whose members are untied to the quest or united in the quest for happiness.
Correct.
Yeah, tell us what inspired you and what drives your passion on this topic?
That is a very personal quest, Mary Jo, because I woke up one day and said, this is not the life I signed up for. So things were going well, but there was no meaning in what I did, and I was, quote, successful, unquote, but deeply unfulfilled. Now, what I had been doing all my life was reading a lot of spiritual biography, mystical autobiography, which would take you to a nice place, and then I came back to the real world.
A physics student by background,
I started off as a physics student before I saw the light and switched over to business.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, if all of this stuff is useful only if you're sitting quietly thinking peaceful thoughts and not when you came to the hurly-burly, then it's actually pretty useless. So one day I had my personal epiphany, which is, why don't I create a course which will take the teachings of the world's great masters, adapt them so that they're acceptable to intelligent people in a post-industrial society. And the thought of doing something like that made me come alive. So I did it primarily as part of my own personal journey. I needed something like that to bring the stars into my eyes. And the course took off like a rocket.
Wow, so that was your early inspiration in terms of designing the course. And how did you go about designing? Just so everyone knows, he's had one of the most successful MBA courses in the history of MBA courses, I guess. And it was at Columbia, and he's taught it at London Business School.
So I've studied at Columbia, at London Business School, at Berkeley, at Kellogg, and now I teach it privately, rotating between New York, London, and San Francisco, and other areas may get into the act soon.
Great. And how did you go about designing the course? I want to remind our listeners to be sending in any questions as we talk along. Just send in and type in questions, or we'll take questions on the phone. And please do be using Twitter. Our Twitter handles are noted on the first slide that we shared, and our hashtag is happy, so please do share on that. But, so Srikumar, how did you go about designing the course, and what was how did companies receive this and executives receive this?
Oh, they received it extremely well. Let me backtrack a bit. In the syllabus for my course, when I first conceived it, I said that this will profoundly change your life, and if it doesn't, we're both paid. Now, that's a pretty outrageous promise to make for what was at that time an MBA course. How can an MBA course really change your life? But what I had going for me is where I drew my material from. I drew my material from the greatest spiritual masters the world has ever known, who completely understood the human predicament. And what they came up with has been tested over millennia, and it absolutely works. My contribution was I took all of those, I stripped them of religious, cultural, and other connotations, and converted them into exercises. So I had a pretty good knowledge of what executives and MBA students were grappling with, and then I went back and said, what is it that I've learned from these great masters which is applicable to them, and how can I convert them into practical exercises which they can apply and work with every day? So that's how the course went, and it's always evolving. Each time I teach it, approximately 10 to 15% of the material is new. And I have an alumni organization who tell me what works, what doesn't work, how I can change it to make it better. So it's always evolving and getting better.
So I know you have these very practical tools and exercises that people can start leveraging in their personal lives. And I want to talk about those, and I want to give our listeners a couple of ideas to get started. Before we
Mary Jo and Srikumar, just one quick question. Can you guys move a little bit closer to the microphone? We're getting a little feedback from the audience that they're not being able to hear you as well.
Will do.
Can you, this is better. Okay, great. So please.
Thank you.
Do give us feedback on this. So Srikumar, I was just saying that you have some wonderful practical tools and techniques for individuals to apply to their personal lives in order to shift their destiny and thinking, okay?
Absolutely.
Definitely want to talk about that in just a minute. And before we do, let's talk a bit about what is the state of engagement and happiness today in corporations, and what are you seeing? Because one thing that we're seeing in our network and we're reading a lot about and hearing about is there's a big shift of women transitioning out of the corporate world and starting their own businesses and consulting or joining small organizations. Is that related to engagement and happiness?
It's very definitely related. My own experience, and it's not just my experience, it's also what I hear from alumni of my course who are in many, many big corporations all over the world, is that in general, corporations are less than happy places to work. In general, the level of engagement is low and dropping, and more people are getting fed up with the environment. And while I can't prove it, I'd be very surprised if this wasn't a major reason why many women are opting out. And frankly, I'm all for it. I think that when women go on and start firms, they probably increase their personal happiness, but more important, they probably create organizations which are much more fun to be with and in than the organizations they left. So that's a trend that I'm supporting enthusiastically.
Yeah.
In fact, several persons who have taken my program have transitioned from large corporations to starting their own companies.
So this is something that should be a wake-up call for large companies and organizations.
Absolutely.
And so I think the combination of having you talk about personal mastery and how an individual can go on set a path and set some goals to create a larger sense of happiness and purpose, and then switching over to Alice, who's going to talk about how organizations can retain and keep their women and their executives. I think it's going to be a good combination because we do have a big corporate membership.
Beautifully, yes.
Great. So if you could share with us, what are some ways, or what do you start off with your participants in terms of getting them mentally prepared, and then how do you set them on their path?
I can actually summarize the entire thesis of my course in, a minute or less, and that is we do not live in a real world. We live in a construct. It's very much as if we were living in the Matrix, if any of you have seen the original Matrix. Mm-hmm. Only this hasn't been created by an alien organization out to enslave us. It's something we created. And we created using the thoughts we entertain, our mental chatter, and we created by the way we look at the world, which is our mental models. And therefore, if you're unhappy with the life you're experiencing, there's a very simple solution. You can start deconstructing some of the mental models you've built up and reconstructing them. And that's what my program is all about.
Okay, and what I'd like to do is pose a question, a polling question to our audience.
Sure.
And we really encourage all of you to please answer this. We have two questions. The first one is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the strongest, where are you on a feeling of having a sense of purpose at work today? 10 is the strongest, 1 is having no sense of purpose. You all can answer that question and also the are you genuinely happy at work, and give us your response on your happiness at work. Where are you on a scale of happiness at work? Okay, so thank you for giving us the overview. Now, by getting into real practical applications, so when you say change the mental model?
Okay, let me give you a couple of examples. In virtually every time that I teach the program, I have a certain percentage of persons who say, Jake, I'm feeling very stressed, and it's so bad I am unable to sleep at night. And I have an exercise which I'm going to share with you right now, which has had a 100% track record of solving this particular problem. Most of the time when we say I'm unable to sleep, what we're really saying is there's so much going on in my head that I cannot let go. We have a very unfortunate tendency of expending most of our emotional energy on the 2, 3, or 4 things that are wrong in our lives. More precisely, on the 2, 3, or 4 things that we think are wrong with our lives. And we are totally ignoring the 40, 50, 60 things which are actually pretty darn good. And my exercise is simple. Flip it. Instead of thinking of all the things that are not going right in your life, think about all the things that you have to be truly grateful for. And this is not an intellectual exercise. Most of the persons who come to my programs are type A persons who live in their minds. So this is not an intellectual exercise where you make a list and check off things. Roof over my head, check. Food to eat, check. Good health, check. This is something that you have to feel viscerally. So if you have a habit of living in your head, it might take some time before you get to experience it rather than think it. But if you persist, it will happen. And when you go to bed, do it last thing at night, 5 minutes before you go to bed, and actually experience gratitude for the immense amount of things that are going right in your life. And from that space, sometime you will deal with the things that you're not happy about, but you'll deal with it from the sense of gratitude. And when you get up in the morning, don't go immediately to the place that most of us go, which is, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. But pause and bring that same feeling of gratitude back. And at several times during the day, consciously pause and do that. So the idea is that eventually you try to do this often enough, your default domain will be one of appreciation, gratitude, and when you do, very little will faze you. So that's a very powerful exercise, simple but very powerful.
Yes, so you said a few things, you touched on a few things, and it reminds me of this wonderful graph that I saw of a brain lifting weights, and it's basically saying that we need to exercise our brain.
Yes.
And so you talked about the mental chatter, that we all have so much chatter in our heads, which oftentimes the majority of it is negative chatter.
By far, yes.
Okay, so and then you talked about, we've heard this and I've read a lot about the gratitude, and especially having gratitude or identifying what's going right in your life before you go to bed could actually, according to some studies and the science around this, could actually change sort of your thinking.
Yes.
And you wake up actually happier.
That is absolutely true. In fact, I have anecdotal evidence of this. A number of persons who have been through my program reported not only did they have no problem falling asleep, but they actually slept better, woke up refreshed, and this is the kicker. They found innovative solutions to problems that had been troubling them for
creativity.
Ages, yes.
Yeah, I think that's what's motivated me the most on your work, and then actually combining mindfulness meditation with this. So to use mindfulness meditation to eliminate the chatter and to keep your mind quieter.
Mindfulness is a big chunk of my program.
Yeah. Tell us, how do people respond to that, and does it take a while to get into?
It takes a long while to get it because we're so used to being unmindful.
Yes.
But I've had people, including CEOs of major organizations, say that that's one of the greatest things they got out of it. Because when you're mindful, what I typically advocate is don't try to be mindful all the time because you're not going to succeed and you're going to feel awfully frustrated. But you can learn to recognize when you're not being mindful. Become mindful for short stretches at will, and start off by saying, okay, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to mindfully do X, whatever X is. You know, could be answering your email, could be speaking on the phone to an important customer, could be clearing up your backlog, writing a report, doesn't matter. But set yourself a time limit where you are genuinely mindful for that, and I advocate setting a short time limit, not more than 20 minutes max.
And when you say mindful, what do you mean by that?
By that I mean that whenever your thoughts drift to something else, as it has a habit of doing, you gently pull it right back and observe your mental chatter, and every time it goes off track, bring it right back again.
Especially if it goes to a negative place. Bring it back.
Especially if it goes to a negative place. Absolutely correct. It's much, much tougher to do this than you think, but once you get the hang of it, you'll recognize that you get a lot more done with less sense of strain.
Right, and so it's interesting when you talk on your TED Talk about our mental models and that we all want to be happy. You know, that's our natural disposition.
Yes.
We've just been trained over the years, and we're sort of on a downward spiral.
We train ourselves, yes.
And so to retrain ourselves, I think that an exciting piece of research that it's resonated with me is some of the work on the science of positivity, and there's people who are studying this, like Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who she indicates that we have like 50% of our genetic code or predisposition can be manipulated. So we can manage, and if we can create a new mental model, we can actually change our disposition.
Yes, indeed we can.
So have you seen this with, let's go back to corporations and executives at work. Let's paint a picture of, you know, someone who's trying to have it all, a woman who's trying to have it all and managing 2 kids at home, elderly parents, juggling, you know, the daily responsibilities, and even trying to be supportive in her community and maybe serving as a volunteer on a campaign she believes in. And on top of it, has a difficult boss. Give me, if I came in as a client, what would you say to me? How would you address all those challenges?
The first thing is I would like you to recognize that you're living a happy, purposeful existence is pretty much within your control. Are we on? Are we off? Okay, we're back on. Is pretty much within your control. We have a habit of thinking that external circumstances are determining our level of well-being, and I'd like to emphasize that this is not so. External events are external events. Whether or not they disturb our equanimity is pretty much up to us. So look at it, for example, from the perspective of an air traffic controller. Now, air traffic controllers are very, very, very stressed individuals, and they have all kinds of problems when they're not at their seat of work. But when they are working, they are effortlessly juggling many planes through different airspaces, preventing closed business and so on, because they've trained themselves to function in that environment. In exactly the same way, we can train ourselves. So part of the problem is that we tend to personalize things that happen to us. So you got a toxic boss, you say, oh, why is he or she doing this to me and is out to get me and so on. So let me give you an example. This is, again, a very powerful example. Let's assume you're a civil engineer, and I'm a county executive, and I call you in my office because I want to have a road built, and you want the contract. So I want the road built from place A to place B, and between place A and place B, there's a forest, a swamp, and a mountain. Do you get angry at the forest, the swamp, and the mountain? You don't, right? You're a civil engineer. That's the terrain you've been given. It's your job to figure out how you're going to get the road built and are you going to go under, over, or through, right? And if it turns out to be a particularly deep swamp or a thick forest, you might double your fee, but that's it, right? In exactly the same way, you are the civil engineer in charge of building the road to a fulfilled, happy existence.
Yeah.
The cantankerous people that you meet, the situations that you face, they're the forest, the trees, and the swamps. You don't get annoyed at them. That's the terrain you have been given. And your skill as a civil engineer is how are you going to build your road to a happy, fulfilled life. Now, if you just have that as a model, instead of getting annoyed and frustrated at the things that are coming, you're simply looking at, that's the terrain I've got. What do I have to do to navigate that terrain?
Yeah.
And the more you think about it that way, dispassionately, the more you'll find that you're more effective and you're happy as you're doing it.
Yes, what you're saying is quite interesting, and I found myself after doing your course taking that, having a shift in how I look at something. Now, if people actually look at obstacles, like you said, as, oh, this is an opportunity to actually leverage the skills that I've developed over the last 10 years and see how effectively I can get around these obstacles.
And that's a new mental model, by the way.
New mental model, instead of looking at it as someone's trying to stop me from being successful.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think one thing you said, it's really quite interesting. You said many interesting things, actually, but the point on how we take things personally. Like, we think that a toxic boss or a difficult colleague or family member is personally attacking us or behaving that way because of something we did or how they feel about us, and shifting it so it's really not about us. It's about how maybe the person is feeling, and they would behave that way with anyone.
In fact, here is something which you and the persons listening might find very helpful. Think of your boss as a FedEx guy. Now, this is powerful. Let me explain why. We have a habit of saying, oh, a boss is a powerful entity. You know, he can do good things for you, promote you, give you good assignments, or do bad things for you, up to and including firing you. Therefore, I've got to placate this powerful being. And I'm saying that that's not a model which serves you well. Instead of think of the boss as a FedEx guy. So whatever good comes to you through your boss, not from your boss. It's the universe providing that to you.
Boss. Okay?
So the FedEx guy delivers the package, and you thank him because you're polite. But do you think the FedEx guy gives you the package? No, the package came from somewhere else. The FedEx guy was the guy who delivered it. In exactly the same way, whatever good comes to you through your boss, not from your boss. And equally, if something negative comes to you, it comes through your boss and not from your boss. So your boss is simply the instrument of delivery. He's the FedEx guy. And if you use that as a model, you will find that it is a benevolent universe, which is another model that we can talk about later if we have time, which is delivering that. So take it from the universe, and your boss is just an instrument. You're going to be polite, but he or she in no way, shape, way, or form can determine your well-being unless you give that power away.
I like that metaphor.
Never give that power away.
Yeah. Never give that power away. That's an interesting metaphor, because when you get your package from the FedEx guy, if the FedEx guy it's how he delivers it. If he doesn't deliver it with a smile, you still got your package. You got the information that you needed.
Yep.
So looking at it that way is quite interesting. Now, someone had posed, in fact, one of our board members, Ann Frisch, who is our VP Treasurer for the Federation Board, she sent me a question yesterday, and she talked about how, intrinsically people are motivated by status, money, title within an organization. And her question was, as a leader, she manages, she's a CFO, and she manages a strong team. How would you recommend that people or leaders like this get their team focused on the intrinsic values of creating value, of purpose, of how to inspire them?
A couple of things. First of all of the things that you mentioned, power, status, I don't think they are intrinsic motivations at all. They are learned motivation.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The bad news is that our society, as it's presently structured, is geared towards strengthening that to an incredible degree. For example, the most popular issue of Forbes is the Forbes 400, which is celebrating mega wealth. So we are surrounded by such influences. They're all around us. That's something we acknowledge. In terms of what a person who's trying to set a different culture can do, the most important single thing that person can do is to be anchored in a different set of values herself. Okay. And when she is sufficiently anchored in that and learns how to communicate it effectively, she doesn't have to do quote-unquote anything. Others get motivated and inspired simply because they run into contact with her. Think about Gandhi when he was starting off his work as in South Africa. He didn't set out to become a leader who inspired millions of others. His goal was, the passport laws are unjust and I will not let them stand. And he was a British-trained attorney and verbally fluent, and he used whatever talents he had to mobilize support for the cause, which is what he really believed in. And in the process of doing that, and of course later on against colonial rule in India, he did in fact become a leader who inspired hundreds of millions, even 60 years after he passed on. So first be inspired yourself. Then learn to communicate that vision. When you're inspired yourself, it has to be with vision, which brings a greater good to a greater community.
Yeah, you said something interesting. We're going to talk later about this with Alice, too, is these Forbes lists. I love that, now it's a big deal that they list the top companies for sustainability, and we'll talk about that a bit later, too. But we do celebrate things that maybe aren't what we should anchor our values in. So what would you like to see in terms of a Forbes list of, celebrating organizations or people who inspire and drive purpose and meaning?
Let me give you an example. There is a person, a school teacher, who was passionate about chess, and he went to one of the really, really at-risk schools with lots of at-risk kids, and he got them interested in chess, and he trained them, and they became close to a championship school chess team. There are lots of people like that who are engaged in endeavors which help many, many people, particularly those who are most at risk in the society that we have formed. And a lot of them are social entrepreneurs. A lot of them are Ashoka Fellows, if you know about Ashoka. So I would like to have such people held up as champions rather than, but in addition to our athletes, sports people, and, you know, our super wealthy financial executives. So if we have lists which celebrate, let's say, the top social entrepreneurs or the kids who have really broken bounds in science projects, we have the Westinghouse, we used to be the Westinghouse Talents, been taken over now by another company, and only those in the know who these kids are who have really produced cutting-edge research and projects, but the general population is not aware of them at all. If we had a method for recognizing and celebrating them, it'll kind of shift the focus of where what people think about as valuable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's interesting because it's really a societal or corporate organizational and an individual challenge. I think working together.
Corporations can do a great deal by what they do.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Okay. There are companies that I'm working with, for example, where they are looking at what is it that we can do to create a culture where employees, they're not even called employees anymore. That's a term that has connotations. Team members. So the idea is, we're going to have occasions where team members celebrate each other. So here's the most valuable team member. But the organization doesn't pick the team members. The team members pick who they feel helped them most in the performance of their job, and that's celebrated. Each team member has a certain discretionary something, could be cash, could be points, which they can arbitrarily award to anybody who helps them. But the point is, all of a sudden, you're focusing attention on something else, which is helpful behavior is not only expected, but is recognized and encouraged. Exactly.
Yeah.
So lots of things like that companies and corporations can do internally to build what we recognize, what we encourage.
Yeah. So rewarding, the sense of rewards or consequences really does.
Acknowledgement more than anything tangible, yes.
Yeah. So a lot of what we're talking about is really about changing habits, right? Changing habits and altering our habits.
Yes.
What are some things? Again, I read a book recently on changing habits or habit hacking, and they mentioned some things like if you want to create a habit of exercising more, you leave your tennis shoes in front of your bed, or when you walk in the house, your tennis shoes are the first thing you see when you walk into your house, which has helped me on some things.
Sure.
What are some things you can physically do to remind yourself of creating new habits around looking through a rose-colored lenses each day?
A lot of these things are what I call technique-based. By technique-based, what I mean is you make it difficult for you to snack by hiding your snack at the bottom of the refrigerator or throwing them out, or you make it easy to exercise because you leave your sneakers outside. But I have a different suggestion, which is why don't you change the mental models you have which are preventing you from going off and exercising or stopping snacking. It's a much deeper process, but if you succeed in that, a whole range of issues clear themselves up in your life, not just one issue. That actually is the core of my program.
There really is a contagion effect.
Yes. When you try to see what is happening and make changes at the mental model level, it clears up entire areas of your life. When relationships improve, they don't just improve at work, they also improve with your spouse, with your children, with your in-laws, and everyone else.
Yeah.
It's a much more powerful, a much deeper process.
Yeah. One thing, no matter what, the challenge is, we're always going to fall back into some old patterns and habits. I think the challenge is regaining our balance and then being reminded to move forward. One of the things I've done on my daily reminder, I have a reminder that pops up about just before lunch, and it says, "Smile, it's a beautiful day." And for me, that's important.
Yes.
I'm like, high energy, and I'm doing too many things in a day, and then I think that when that reminder pops up every day, there's something then that is triggered. I think of like a quote that you talked about. I always think about the chatter, getting the chatter out of my head, and so mindfulness, again, has helped in changing my mental models on that. Those are some things, or having for me, I love my dog. So I have a little picture of my dog that I carry around, and I fumble in my wallet, and I come across it sometimes. And so I love my partner, too. So I just want to say that in case he's listening. Oh, Ralph.
That's my dog.
So Shrikkumar is showing me right now his iPhone, and on the back of his iPhone, he has the most adorable picture of a blonde lab. Is it a blonde lab? And a white lab, and his family, his 2 daughters and his lovely wife. So these are things that every day when you pick it up, if you look at the back end, it'll make you happy.
Exactly correct.
So, yeah.
And that is a gift box from my daughter, by the way.
That. So those are the things we have to do more of.
Yes.
What are the little things? I was talking to a young person recently in the last couple of days, and really trying to encourage her to put something, and you're self-conscious when you're like in your early mid-20s, and so she wasn't willing to put a picture of a puppy or a picture of something in her work cubicle. But I just said, put a yellow sticky that's a bright color. Put a smiley face. Something that this is going to trigger a reminder to shift your mental model.
Exactly correct. And also what happens is, you can put it up, but it simply becomes part of the background because we have an incredible capacity to make everything mechanical.
Yes.
So you have to remind yourself to be mindful and not mechanical.
Mindful and not mechanical. When we go through life just robotically.
Exactly correct.
Reflection is key.
Yes.
Very, very interesting. I want to really encourage everyone to answer the questions that we posed to you. So let's see what the responses are. It's interesting. I think we have, it's sort of the largest numbers are in the middle, like in terms of how happy you are. 5, 6, 7 have the highest. So it's like, well, we want to get those numbers to 10. So that's our goal. We want you to, those who are in the 5, 6, 7 in terms of middle range of happiness and purpose actually as well, we really want to try to get those up to the
8s and 9s.
8s and 9s, okay? So we really want to encourage you to explore further some of these techniques and tools that Shrikkumar has posed to us, and we'll talk to Alice a little bit more about what corporations can be doing and how you can inspire your corporations to alter their cultures and explore some new ways of creating more engagement. Any questions out there that you all want to pose by phone, or you can email us to see if there's any Q&A. Let's go to the Q&A and see if we have any.
So, Mary Jo, if you look at the very last one, there's one from Bernadette about the example that the engineer example.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jennifer. So the example of the engineer and the swamp, et cetera, is a good one. But direct exchanges with difficult people don't allow for reflection as it happens so quickly, okay? How do we avoid responding negatively in such a scenario? Because after the situation, you can step back and reflect, but you're saying, the question is when you're in the midst of it, how do you stop yourself?
And this is something
that downward spiral.
It's a very good question. So the only way you're going to pull this off is to role play potential scenarios well in advance of their actually happening.
Practice. Okay.
So you practice it internally many, many, many times, be in a situation. And what is important, one of the reasons you go off in an unfortunate direction in the middle of an exchange is because of the emotional space that you're occupying. If the emotional space that you're occupying is that of an employee who's being unfairly put upon by a toxic boss, then you are likely to either retreat inappropriately or flare up also inappropriately, or any of a bunch of behaviors you'll regret. But if you're occupying the space of, here I am, confident, and the universe is throwing curveballs at me, and, I'm incredibly talented at batting those curveballs away, you'll react differently. So role play and rehearse and pay attention to who you are being. That's extremely important.
So, Srikumar, when you're in a confrontational situation with your boss, to actually look at it and say, okay, he's throwing me something, I'm going to be able to bat it because I'm prepared.
Exactly right.
And he's making me stronger for this.
Correct. That's the space that you occupy before you go into the meeting.
Okay. Very, very
And also,
relevant.
by the way, once you train yourself, if you find the situation spiraling out of the control, you can change the emotional domain you occupy, provided you are mindful.
Okay.
So we all come down to mindfulness in one way or another.
Okay, great. On that note, sometimes we do think about that, like, what has the universe given us?
Mm-hmm.
And, why am I in this situation, or why do I have a difficult family situation, or why did I have find the wrong partner and go through a divorce, or any challenges that we personally have. You talked a little bit about the benevolence of. Can you
Yes.
touch on that?
Yes. See, what happens basically, this actually comes down from a quote by Einstein. Now, Einstein, of course, is a genius, but most of the time when we think Einstein is a genius, we talk about his scientific accomplishments with theory of relativity, the photoelectric effect, and so on. But Einstein did come up with a profound question which affects every one of our lives. And his profound question was, the most important decision you will ever make is the universe friendly? Now think about that. A few of us go through life knowing the universe is unfriendly and the sole purpose of the universe is to frustrate us. We all know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of us go through life thinking the universe is indifferent, doesn't know it exists, doesn't know we exist, doesn't care about us. Every once in a while it does something that helps us, and every once in a while, maybe more often, it does things that frustrate us, but essentially it doesn't care for us.
Mm-hmm.
But supposing instead the universe were actually friendly. So if the universe is friendly, friends don't screw friends, right? So whatever it gives you is something that you need. It might not be something that you want, but it's something that you need. So if you were a child, for example, you might want a tub of ice cream, but a wise parent will make sure you get fruits and vegetables, which are not what you want. You wanted the ice cream, but later on you realize that vegetables were what you really needed. In exactly the same way, if you have a benevolent universe, then whatever it gives you is for your growth, even if you don't recognize it. And if you have the faith that that's so, then you think about, hey, what's the lesson I have to learn, and how quickly can I learn it so it goes away? And it completely changes your perspective on whatever happens to you.
That's a real mental
That's the
shift.
benevolent universe model, and just because you recognize that a model is superior doesn't necessarily mean that you can adopt it. But if you recognize that this is a superior model, there are ways in which you can actually incorporate that as part of your life, and, in a very real sense, that's what my program is about.
So that is, and really the alternative is to go on a downward spiral,
Exactly
which is
correct.
no good. So,
Yes.
So changing it to whatever the world or the universe offers you is for your own learning purposes, and it's meant for you.
Correct.
And it'll make you a stronger person. Just that alone, that mental shift, will create an upward spiral of more positivity.
Instantaneously.
And will build resilience.
Yes.
You'll be able to bounce back, be more open-minded, creative.
All of those things,
Okay.
yes.
One other question here that we have, we say, one of our listeners is saying that she's tried, and it's really hard. I'm sure she believes in this, and it is hard until you, and I will be one to say, you have to practice it for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. You really have to faithfully do these things.
I'd like to change that. This is something that you embark on, and it's a journey that lasts the rest of your life.
But until you have it where it starts becoming habitual,
Correct.
you have to just really practice.
There is a phrase to remember for that: gentle, persistent pressure.
Gentle, persistent pressure.
You're gentle with yourself, you are persistent, then you do force yourself, beyond the limits of comfort, and you have to do it mindfully. You cannot do it mechanically. But if you do that, you will find results, and you'll find the results coming very fast, certainly within 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, and because this listener is saying, and actually she's an outstanding and a fantastic volunteer, and she's in the legal profession. I happen to know her, and she is saying, that the mental chatter, if you have negative mental chatter, it's what's the first thing you would say? Because it's hard changing that mental chatter. Like, how do you help someone stop that mental chatter?
Don't try to change it. Don't try to stop it. Just observe it.
Observe it.
Become aware of how much chatter you have, how much of it is negative, and how much of it is taking you to a place you don't want to go. Just observe it. You don't try to stop it because you can't. Don't try to change it because initially, at least, it's very difficult to redirect it. Just observe it. And the very fact of observing it will make it less strong, will attenuate it to a great extent, and make it less easy for it to drag you where you don't want to go. Our problem isn't mental chatter. Our problem is that we identify with our mental chatter and get carried away by it.
We identify with our mental chatter.
That is the problem, not the mental chatter. Mental chatter is like a movie. It's going on.
Interesting. And then we start playing, we start entering that movie. We get engrossed in the movie, and then we contribute to the movie. We become an actor in the movie.
Exactly correct.
Oh, that's a really strong metaphor. Okay, so let's see if there's any other questions here. Anyone on the phone want to pose a question? Anyone on the phone?
As a reminder, to ask a question over the phone, please press *1 to cue our operator. Again, that is *1 on your telephone keypad.
Okay. In closing, let me just say pose one final question on managing the future. So creating a future where sometimes people have anxiety and fear around the future, which does create negative mental chatter. What are some recommendations you can give to our listeners on managing sort of future expectations or anticipations?
Okay. What happens is we are very goal-obsessed, and we have a very clear vision of this is how things should be. And I'm all for goals because I think goals are wonderful inventions, but goals are only important insofar as they set direction. Once the direction has been set, completely forget about the goals and invest in the process. What do you have to do in order to accomplish the goal? That's where you put your emotional energy. If you succeed, wonderful. If you don't succeed, wonderful. Whether or not you actually achieve your goal is dependent on many factors outside your control. So stop agonizing over it. So you want the world to be a particular way, make it or try your level best to make it that way. And if you succeed, fine. If not, you've enjoyed the journey, and that's fine too. So make your peace with it. And it is possible to inculcate that. It's a habit or a skill, just like learning to ride a bicycle. But if you do that, it will pay for itself in spades.
I had a situation. I just finished up my summer holidays in Montana with my family, and I went fly fishing for a whole day with my father. And I said to my dad at the end of the day, I said, Dad, how many fish did you catch? Thinking that I maybe had exceeded his catch because I caught 4. We were on different boats. And he said to me, Mary Jo, it's not about how many fish you catch. It's about the journey of going down the river.
Yes.
Did you notice how beautiful everything was around you? And I right away say, oh, so you didn't catch any, huh? So it was a funny conversation. It was such a reminder to me when he said that. It's about the journey and enjoying the beauty of everything around us.
The journey is the only thing you have. That is correct. And we tend to forget that when we're goal-obsessed.
Absolutely. Oh, that resonated with me, and I always think about that around the goals and the journey instead of the destination. So, This has been incredibly helpful. There's so much more we would like to talk about. I mean, you didn't even address the feeding the dog or the wolf or other things, but you need to listen to his TED Talk to find out what does he mean by feeding the dog versus the wolf, and what does he mean by, you know?
Well, there's a simple way people can find out about that. I'm going to make a whole pile of these videos available, so if they go to my website and register, they will be getting steady drips of this audio, video, and writing.
Great, great. Okay, so it's been such a pleasure to be in New York City with you here, and I know you're going to be in London in early October.
Correct. I'm going to be in San Francisco tomorrow.
Oh, great. He's traveling all over the world as his speaking engagements increase and all the great work you're doing. So thank you for dedicating time to Professional Women's Network, PWN Global. We have an audience of over 100 participants listening from all over the world, and we have a handful of people from Mercer and MMC who are on the phone with us as well.
And hello to your wonderful community. It's been my pleasure to be with you today. And thank you for taking the time to be here.
Great. Okay, good. So we still have Srikumar with us, and we're going to transition to Alice. And Alice Korngold, as you can see on her introductory slide, she is also based in New York City and runs a very successful consulting practice called Korngold Consulting, and is a an activist. She's a self-described activist, and she told me this morning on the elevator coming up this morning, we arrived here at 8:15, and New York is actually, it was very pretty this morning. It looks like it's getting a little cloudy right now. She said that she's been volunteering since she was 9 years old. She studied in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, has authored a number of books, and is the author of articles that are published on Huffington Post and Fast Company. And one quick thing I wanted to say about Alice and why I'm so excited to be here with her. We just discovered, I was telling her that a few years ago I tapped into one of her articles on volunteerism and how it develops leadership skills. And we tapped into it because at PWN we have over 300 volunteers and across 24 cities. And we want to inspire all of our members. We want to drive all of our members when they register to sign a volunteer pledge. So they're not only joining a network, but they're pledging to give something back. If it's 1 hour a month, if it's 25 hours a year or whatever the amount is, we want them to pledge to be a volunteer. And I leveraged her articles and her books years ago before we connected on Twitter, and was sharing those articles with our board and with our corporate partners. And now for me to actually know Alice and be able to have a dialogue with her today, it's a real privilege. So welcome, Alice. And
Thank you.
Give us an introduction. And
Thank you. Well, I'm thrilled to be here and to have met you in person. Twitter's been an amazing connector. And you're brilliant to put Srikumar and me together because it's a very complimentary. And thank you to PWN Global and to MMC and to Mercer for hosting our program today. It's really exciting, and what a fabulous audience. This is an incredibly exciting time for multinational corporations, for companies, in terms of engaging employees. I've been working at the intersection of nonprofits, NGOs, and companies for 30 years. And there was a time when nonprofits were on one end of the spectrum and companies were on the other, nonprofits being mission-oriented and businesses being about money, strictly about money. And what's really exciting now is that multinational corporations have an opportunity to attract, retain, develop, energize, and motivate the best employees in 2 ways. By shaping the corporate mission and strategy in terms of solving the world's most daunting challenges, and number 2, providing opportunities for employees to develop personally and professionally through volunteer and leadership service. So this is good for employees, good for the company, and good for the world. So let me explain that briefly. This is through my work and on my research last year, a very intense period of research for my latest book, which is A Better World, Inc.
I've read that. That's very good. A really nice read.
How companies profit by solving global problems where governments cannot. The big takeaway, which kind of shocked me how powerful this was, is that Actually, only multinational corporations can truly solve the world's most daunting problems. Now, coming from someone who's
versus government and
versus government, but even more powerful than nonprofits. Now, coming from someone who's devoted her life to nonprofits, this was rather shocking. The reason is that multinational corporations have the resources, financial, human, and technology, and the global footprint, and the profit motivation to truly solve global problems. Now, the ones that are successful do so in partnership with NGOs and nonprofits. They engage with stakeholders, and environmental and social issues are on the board's agenda, and these successful companies are committed to disclosure and transparency. So those are the conditions for success, and the book is filled with case studies and examples of companies that have been successful. Let's back up and let me mention some of the challenges I'm talking about. I'm talking about poverty, where still 1 billion people live in poverty in our world, and that's a serious threat. Besides being a problem in terms of humanity, it's a threat. It's a geopolitical threat. It's a threat in terms of violence and world stability. There's also an opportunity in that 3 billion people will be entering the middle class in the next several years, and that in Africa alone there will be $400 billion in consumer opportunities in the consumer markets in Africa alone in the next several years. So a business opportunity. Climate change, a massive threat, but solutions present opportunities for businesses in terms of energy efficiency and renewable energy. Ecosystems loss, tremendous threat for air, water, timber, arable land, but business solutions is an opportunity. Education, students not getting the STEM education they need, science, technology, engineering, and math. So there's a gap between jobs that are available and the workforce that's not developed, but education and workforce development is a business opportunity that leads to economic development, healthcare, human rights, the list goes on. So what we're seeing is that some companies are seeing opportunities to describe their missions and their purpose in terms of solving global problems. If you look at Ericsson, GSK, Dow, Unilever, look at their mission statements. Their mission statements sound like nonprofit mission statements. GSK, our mission is to help people do more, feel better, live longer. Dow combines the power of science and technology to passionately innovate what is essential to human progress. And these companies are partnering with outstanding NGOs to solve global problems. So the opportunity is working with these companies to innovate, solve problems. And the second is this, that today, 29 multinational corporations, this is the growth from nothing 5 years ago, or from a handful, deploy 6,000 employees in 64 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America to provide skilled volunteer services to help social enterprises, because this strengthens economic development and relationships in countries where companies want to do business. And employees, the studies show, come back energized with a higher engagement in their careers at these companies, with a better cultural understanding, ready to innovate, and with a greater ability to work independently, more adaptable, better with teamwork. Let me add one more thing, is that another tremendous opportunity is for employees, executives and professionals to serve on nonprofit boards, NGO boards of directors, which is a leadership development opportunity also for stakeholder engagement and capacity and capability building in emerging markets and worldwide to address social and environmental challenges. So the opportunities are tremendous, and there's really a coming together of nonprofits and businesses. And let me emphasize, for businesses, these are opportunities to profit by solving global problems, but to energize, motivate, and engage employees. Very exciting times.
Yes, so that you shared a lot of information there. So let's break it apart a bit so we can really separate the key points. That was great. She's passionate about what she does. So what she does is she's really helping companies rethink how they communicate their mission so it incorporates a core sustainable element to their strategy and mission. And by the way, I was looking up the definition under Forbes this late last night on sustainability, and it basically says when a corporation's long-term interests are intellectually and financially consistent with resource efficiency, proactive health, safety practices, and responsible leadership. And that really encapsulates a lot of the things you said, because we have so many big issues out there, so many big issues that companies can be part of creating change and transformation. Now, it's one thing to write it into your mission and strategy, and another thing is to practice it and really mobilize your workforce to support it. How have you seen the best companies mobilize their workforce and create this sense of volunteerism or, solving a huge issue? And does a company itself need to pick one or two causes and then get everyone on board? How does it work?
Every company handles it differently, and let me emphasize that this is not commonplace at this point. Hopefully we'll move in that direction. There are some leading companies that are engaging in some initiatives, and let's
poll our listeners too on this.
Okay, great.
Why don't we do the poll on whether or not their companies, if we can go to the polling questions, and let's then have a dialogue around this. So we're polling our listeners, and I'd say probably 70, 60% of them come from outside of the United States. Do you currently volunteer is our first question. Please go ahead and answer these questions. Do you currently volunteer? Does your organization currently promote opportunities to volunteer as part of the corporate culture? So is your organization right now promoting volunteerism or have a cause or a mission that they not only promote but they support for you to serve as a volunteer? And then the third polling question is, does it appeal to you? Would you, if you don't volunteer, would you like to be part of a personal cause that resonates to you as a volunteer?
So the purpose of my most recent book, A Better World, Inc., How Companies Profit by Solving Global Problems Where Governments Cannot, was to identify companies and some of their activities, to showcase them for other companies to learn from, and to show how to, and to show the win-win-win benefits to the companies, to the communities, to employees, to really inspire others to learn from. So there are a number of really good examples. And as I mentioned, Pyxera Global, a fantastic DC-based NGO, is now working with 29 companies to involve 6,000 employees in 64 countries, primarily in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. SAP is hosting a conference for them in just a couple of weeks for European companies to participate and become more involved. This is really a growing movement. And teams of skilled volunteers, and the volunteers come from many different countries. They come together as a team, and they work in different countries to help social enterprises and small and mid-sized businesses to develop and grow. So it promotes economic development, stakeholder engagement, capacity and capability building, good for the companies. Employees come back. I've interviewed them. Just phenomenal growth experience.
These are cross-cultural, cross-geographic, functional teams from the same company.
Exactly.
And they work together on a mission or a cause. For example, give us an example.
Well, they work in different countries. Some work with governments to help them develop smart cities.
Okay.
And also working in Eastern European countries too. Many of them work with small and mid-sized companies to help them grow to scale, those are major employees, of course. I think half of jobs, half of workforces worldwide are employees through small and mid-sized companies. And for the volunteers, it's an incredible cultural experience. And when I interview them, they say they come back to work and it really changes the way they interact with employees of their own companies with greater and deeper understanding.
Why? Because they have a deeper personal...
They understand and appreciate diversity in a better way, because they often don't have the language skills when they're in these other countries. So they have to listen better and understand better, so they bring that back to the workplace. They have to work with their teams abroad without the usual infrastructure they have, so they have to be pretty adaptable and ingenious, so they become innovative. And when they go back to their work, too, they can innovate new products and services or adapt the company's products and services for new markets. So there are just all kinds of benefits, and they're really energized and motivated. I think the dream, though, is that it's not just handfuls of employees from companies, but that this becomes company-wide. And my thinking about that is I'm very passionate about corporate boards, that there needs to be more diverse composition, and I think people like this also who will become better leaders ultimately.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about this, and hopefully we could talk even more about this after our webinar. In our organization, so I've mentioned we have 300 volunteers, and without a doubt, the ones who are the most active volunteers who serve as board members are the most engaged. And they have the highest rating on the PWN network experience. So the more you volunteer, the higher your happiness, the better your experience, and the more engaged you are in the network.
Yes.
So that's why we're really going toward a model of where every member is a volunteer in some way.
Yes.
You know, their leadership skills have really advanced because, like you said, when you work across different cultures, you learn what it's like to resolve conflict or inspire across someone who's from Germany, France, Singapore, Dubai, or Sao Paulo, or wherever. And that's a challenge because your whole language, I remember an executive at NBC said to me once, don't assume that the person who speaks the best English is the smartest in the room.
Oh, my goodness.
And that is, for a global executive, don't assume that.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, so
it's unfortunate that has to be said, but it does.
You quickly learn that. In a global, I've been living in Europe for 12 years now, and I have learned that in spades, that sometimes the one with the thickest accent has the most to contribute in the room, and they're just not able. So I think being a volunteer in a global capacity teaches you just that one thing alone. Now, we've also thought about, you know, because we're a not-for-profit, it's a different type. It's advancing women in leadership. So a lot of our members have said, we need to get involved in, you know, curing cancer. We need to get involved in, you know, advancing poverty or, you know, fixing things. And so I oftentimes think, should we combine, would that create even more intrinsic motivation if we had a really a need that we were aligned with, in addition to advancing women in leadership?
So there's two issues. One is what the company does as a company, and the other is what individuals do.
Okay.
So as far as individuals, companies hire me to train and place executives and professionals on nonprofit boards, NGO boards. It's very important that people be matched one-on-one to boards where they will be passionate and excited about the mission, because that's when the person will really thrive, develop as a leader, and be the one to say, when they say, well, who will help with this? Hand goes up, I will, and before you know it, they become a leader on the board. And I actually often help coach them as they move into leadership positions, and that reflects well on the company as well. So it's a win-win for the company, the employee, the community, et cetera. So that's individual volunteering, to go where you're really, otherwise it turns into a lose-lose, and that there's no need for that, and that's a horror to me. In terms of the company, it is important for companies to be strategic about where they get involved and which nonprofit partners, NGO partners, and that's a matter of thinking at a high level, what is our corporate mission? What are we trying to accomplish in the world? And I think there's tremendous opportunities for companies to increase their profits by saying, what are the world's most daunting problems, and what are the resources we can bring to bear, financial, technology, human capital, to solve these problems? Those are the big profit opportunities. And then the smart companies are saying, which are the NGO partners, that potential partners that have expertise and access to the remote communities where we want to develop relationships, because those are future markets. So those partnerships are highly valuable, and
so
the
they're
pages
creating
throughout the book talk about this.
Okay.
I mean, Dow Chemical Corporation is working with Acumen Fund in East and West Africa, helping to develop business enterprises that to help expand them to scale. These are enterprises that deal with sanitation, water, energy, and agriculture. The reason being that Dow wants to build plants, manufacturing plants that will cost them $50 billion and last, billions of dollars and last 50 to 100 years. For them, it's a matter of, it's a market research project, but their employees get to get involved and they love it, and so it's smart business for them.
So it's really killing two birds with one stone.
Exactly.
Where you're actually
exactly.
doing volunteer work. Well, we all have heard South Africa, and Africa is really the consumer spending is going up significantly there, and it's a growing economy.
Yes.
So it's really a chance for them to dabble and to be present in that market.
Yes.
And then to also
learn it and understand it before they invest billions of dollars in creating new manufacturing plants. It's the first time they've ever approached it this way. So it's good for the economy, for the people in East and West Africa, but it's brilliant for Dow, and they're loving it. And through a partnership with Acumen, a great NGO. GSK is partnering with Village
Alliances
and with Vodafone to help increase the uptake of DPT vaccines in Mozambique, which will save thousands of lives of babies. And for them, assuming this pilot works as they think it will, it's looking very good, they'll then expand this throughout other countries in Africa.
So which companies are?
This is GSK.
GSK and Vodafone. So do they have how many employees then working as volunteers on this program?
I don't know the number, but this is an example of a company using its resources to solve a problem. I mean, the deaths in...
And they have teams of volunteers doing this within the company.
Yes, and working with a partner, which is Village Reach. And the 40% of deaths in low-income countries are children under 5. In high-income countries, 1%. So this is a solvable problem, and it's a business opportunity for GSK. Okay. But here again, the NGO partnership is really key.
So are more and more companies, the strategic alliance and finding the cause that resonates with employees.
Exactly.
So is this something that you're seeing companies, because I remember in my days at Russell Reynolds, there were a number of my clients who would actually give, I think Microsoft was one of them, they would give employees a number of days in a year to go and volunteer, and they would allow them to take off, not as a vacation day. It was part of their reward system. Is this something that companies are doing more and more?
Some do and some don't. Actually, you asked about GSK and the International Corporate Volunteering. They work with Fixera Global. They're one of the ones that works with them. And here it does help to work with experts because then you're ensured that your international work experience will be a good one, and that people are taken care of, and you don't want to take any chances.
So this is interesting, an interesting solution, and sort of one aspect of a remedy, I'm sure, for companies in challenging industries right now. So let's say, or cultures that are going through transformation. So some telecommunications companies, banks. I know one of our partners is on, RBS is on the phone with us. I mean, some of these cultures have had challenges over the last couple of years, and I think that just the level of engagement or happiness has maybe been impacted by external perspectives or points of view on the industry, lack of trust or diminishing trust. So what a great opportunity for companies like this to actually, it seems difficult because their industry is having a difficult time right now, but what a great opportunity for them to develop a campaign like this.
Absolutely. Ericsson is a telecommunications company based in Stockholm. Look at their mission statement is to use innovation to empower people, business, and society. Our mobile and fixed networks, multimedia solutions, and telecom services make a real difference to people's lives in the world we live in. They focus on smart cities, education in Africa. Their sustainability and social environmental impact is through and through everything they do in their company.
Okay.
And there's an exuberance about what they do.
So how would you, I know this has to happen from the inside out or the outside in. By that I mean, can the employees drive it, or does it have to be driven from the outside? It has to be an executive initiative. And how can you encourage our listeners to actually be champions on this in their own organizations? What can they do?
So the companies that are successful, it is all the way into the board level. I will say that. It has to be at the very top. The CEO and the board have to get it, and there are ways of, you asked me earlier, how do you tell if a company is really and truly committed to this? And that is one of the tests, which I can talk a little bit more about. For employees who want to encourage their companies, I will say that at this point, it's a tool to recruit and retain employees when companies do encourage and support volunteerism and are engaged in social and environmental impact. So one answer is to vote with your feet. Now, that's easy to say and harder to do because people need jobs.
Yeah.
But I would say to connect with kindred spirits and, try to organize volunteering, speak to the
So you can do it through grassroots.
Yeah, I mean, I would do the best you can through grassroots. Talk with your foundation people, with the charitable giving people, with human resources, with corporate citizenship people. And I think, and my book really makes the case that this is profitable for companies, and the drivers are consumers, investors, and employees.
Yeah.
And it really is crystal clear. This is profitable for companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see that. And every company is challenged with engagement. I mean, I know the latest report I read, it was below 50% in many geographies, lower than that in terms of employees being engaged with the work they're doing. Alice, I want to just mention our polls. I was concerned at first, but the questions got turned around, so now it makes sense to me. So the question is do you currently volunteer? We have 43% of the people say they do. They do currently volunteer. And then does your organization currently promote opportunities to volunteer as part of the corporate culture? So this is good to hear. It's 48% say yes. 48% of our listeners say yes, over 100 listeners, so that's good to know. And then is volunteering for a cause of personal interest appealing to you? So there we have a very high amount, and that's over 60% say yes. So there is a very strong interest in actually volunteering and supporting a cause that they're passionate about.
That's personally meaningful.
So that's meaningful.
Finding that cause that's personally meaningful is hard. So it helps when a company will provide some facilitation for that.
So is volunteering, I think it's good for corporations to hear this. So these are mostly corporate women who are on the phone with us. So over 60% of them say it is something that they would like to do. And then on the last question is, do you sit on an NGO board today? We have 18% said yes, they do.
So volunteering, boards in particular, but volunteering in general, and for women, for everyone, but for women, I say this especially, is a tremendous opportunity for leadership development. And usually, there are no glass ceilings.
For women.
If you're willing to hold your hand up and say, I'll help with this, I'll do this, before you know it, you're leading something. For better or for worse.
Hey, look at our board.
You're leading something. And that is an amazing way to develop and exercise your leadership skills, passion, energy. So one, if you don't get to at work, you get to in that environment. And two, it can translate into work. It can help you move into higher positions at work. And whether or not you do get that opportunity at work, you get to exercise that outside of work. That is very rewarding.
That is a great point. Is for women especially, there are no glass ceilings, and you could take on leadership roles and prove your leadership skills much easier in many ways.
Absolutely.
Let me ask as we close up, and I want to ask both you and Trikumar this question. When you look at gender differences between men and women in terms of happiness, engagement, volunteerism, talk about that for a minute.
Oh, wow. I don't know the answer, but I will say, and I love listening to Srikumar, and I'm reading and loving his book. It really resonates, you know, taking control of your life and having choice. And as Mary Jo said, I volunteered since I was 9, and now that I think of it, I think it's the one area of your life you can really, really control. You can choose where you volunteer. You can really put yourself into it. It's about your personal passions. It's about, it gives you a sense of competence. It's rewarding. It's meaningful. It gives you connections. And I'll bet that's really what it was about for me always.
I would imagine it really builds
it's all yours in terms of what you want to contribute and do.
Yeah.
And have an impact. Do something wonderful.
But
you know.
My girlfriend was telling me that she's volunteering on a board here in New York, and she was saying that she went to a dinner recently for the volunteer organization or for this NGO, and one of the board members is the CEO of a very large company, but also sits on an academic board and he was able to provide her some great advice for one of her for her child.
Oh,
who
yes.
was going to apply to a master's program.
Yes.
I mean, just that alone, she's like, wow, just the advice I got
Yes.
from being connected with this person and advancing her network.
So you meet amazing people, and you often can meet people from more diverse backgrounds than in your own limited universe, which I love about it. And secondly, you learn about issues. If, you know, depending on what organizations you choose, you learn more about issues that you didn't know about. And I've liked over my life to engage in different organizations over time. So you learn about this for a few years, you learn about that for a few years, and it's very enriching.
Fantastic. And I'm just curious, Srikumar, as we sign off, are more women doing your course than men, or what's the balance?
It's about half and half.
50-50.
But I will say something about women in the workforce. By and large, my observation has been that women in the workforce feel more stressed and under the gun. And the reason for that is that women place far more demands on themselves. They want to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect boss, the perfect follower. And obviously, you can't pull all of that off. Men know that, and they make their peace with when they fall short. Women have a much greater difficulty making their peace with it, so they beat themselves up more. So in my program, I see when people report on the mental chatter, women carry guilt probably, you know, an order of magnitude more than men do, by and large.
Yeah. Yeah, and for Alice, for you, are you seeing more women engage in corporate volunteerism and on these programs than men, or do you not see different?
I think in the hands-on volunteering, you know, going out to do done-in-a-day projects, you often see more women. But men in the executive suite, it's smart when they go on these projects, and sometimes the tables are turned. You see women in, you know, lower in the hierarchy, heads of teams, and they're the ones bossing around everyone because they know how to organize a project.
You can be bossy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of exciting to see who takes control of the situation and organizes everyone, and it's a very leveling experience for everyone. When people go out and clean up a playground or paint a shelter or something like that, and it's a fun bonding experience, and it's very smart for companies to do that.
Absolutely. Any one question out there that maybe someone wants to pose? If you want to type in a question, or if there's any question on the phone as we close up. Otherwise, I really want to encourage all of you to definitely follow Srikumar and Alice on Twitter, explore their websites, take a look at A Better World, Inc., that fantastic book, and Leveraging Goodwill, and then to get more on Srikumar's programs and what the wonderful ideas on changing or shifting your mental models, take a look at his TED Talk. I think that's where you'll find a good overview. So any questions? I don't see any questions coming through, and if they do come through last minute, then, well, then we'll try to address them at some future
future state or date.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much to both Srikumar and Alice for being with PWN Global for our first leadership webinar series. We will continue this series, and we plan on having another webinar on leadership next quarter. So please stay tuned and take a look at our global newsletter, our global events mailers that go out regularly, and we will take your recommendations on topics as well that you'd like to do a deeper dive on. So we want to thank our participants, our corporate partners for being on the phone with us, Schneider, RBS, Orange, Baxter, and really want to thank MMC for hosting us and Mercer for making this happen in New York City. So have a happy day or happy afternoon wherever you are.
Have a happy rest of your life.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good one.
Thank you for joining us today. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect.